Right, I'm about to delve into the hallowed area of the Velocette chain case and the Velocette clutch. And there it is, the famous Velocette clutch. Indeed, it's not much thicker than the chain and the sprocket. So I shall explain further as that comes apart. There's a little locking tab which has to be undone, and that's about it. Certainly it's something which can be demystified. Right, I'm just doing a little bit of work on the clutch at the moment. I've set this up with an old sleeve gear in a vise, and I'm just going to put all these plates together. There is an order and there's an orientation for the tangs on the plates, so that should be evident in the way I put this together. Well, there you are. This entire clutch pack is just a couple of thou short of an inch thick, and that's pretty extraordinary when you think about the thickness of other the conventional, what you might call conventional British clutch on a motorbike. Anyway, look, I've got some other photographs I might just include as a comparison. There's a Gold Star I did some work on, and there's a man I know who's done some work on a Thunderbird Triumph, and inevitably those clutches are a lot thicker. They've got the drive for the chain and then all the clutch pack out here, whereas the Velocette is built in virtually within the confines of the diameter and dimensions of the sprocket for the primary chain. An amazing contraption. Anyway, the old one is now out, so I just need to do a bit of a clean up before the next one goes in. There's a few little nooks and crannies there that haven't seen the light of day for a long time, and I just need to clean things up. Getting there. Hello, I'm back again. This is the little thrust bearing, and I'm just going to lube all this up, and in preparation to installing it, I've cleaned everything very thoroughly. Oh, and it's just a question now of putting some grease on this so that it stays pretty well together. Any of the grease is likely to be thrown off eventually, and then the oil and the lubrication will be taken care of by the oil in the chain case, which is one of the things I wonder about for people who are running dry belts in their chain case. Let me just put that through there. Oh, bugger. No, that's the trouble. The little rollers fall through. Right, I've got to start again. Right, I think this is running again. I've tried not to get grease all over the camera. Okay, so there's the rollers on what amounts to the outer ring. This is the inner ring with the spherical surface on it. So I'm just going to put a little, well, first of all, to stop them sliding apart again, I'm going to put the ring in. Yes, that's there. And then a little bit of grease on this, which will help stick the whole thing together. Or on the other hand, if the two rings pull apart, it'll at least try and keep the little rollers stuck in the grease wherever they end up. Right, if I just put that down there, That'll do nicely. And then a little bit of grease on this ball type surface. Well, as you can see, I've got the gearbox now back in the motorbike. I just have to secure all the oil lines and do a little bit more on this side before I put the exhaust system on. But over on the other side, let me just come around here. As you can see, the chain case is now on. It's just a question of sorting out the little thrust bearing and putting it all back together. I've got to security wire up these, so I'll just show you that and then we'll crack on. I've already set this distance by trying the clutch and the sprocket on the crank and got the chain tension right, so that's all locked up now. Anyway, back in a minute. Right, I'm just going to show you a little bit of security wiring. The whole purpose of this is to stop these screws winding out. So one of the ways that you do that is make sure that the wire tension will always stop it turning. So these wires are very simple. You simply go from here to about here where you wanted to clamp up. That's far enough. Do nicely. That'll stop that. It'll stop that rotating in that direction, and it'll stop that one rotating in that direction. Well, I'm back now just to start putting all of the clutch parts together, and the first thing to do is to put this little clutch release pack together. This has all been lubed up. The rollers are all intact and lubed. And this spacer here is what holds the clutch out. So that all goes in and that goes there. And then while this isn't properly adjusted yet, if I just put my finger on that and lift the clutch lever, you can see how all that moves. So that's working. So all I have to do now is put all this together. So without joggling the camera too much, I've got the clutch pack held together. Right, that's now intact, and now the next thing is these three little pins. These little pins are driven by the clutch lift bearing, the release bearing. So I'm just going to get it. I'll come back in a minute once I have these installed. It's a bit fiddly and the camera's in the way. Right, I've put those little pins in, and the next stage now is to screw this part in. This part holds the or engages in the outer part of the clutch, and it also winds down. Oh, hang on, something's happening here. And that goes in all the way until it hits the three little pins that go in. Right, I think it's in there. It's far enough in. So the next thing to do now is to load up all these springs. Okay, I'm just wondering how this will work. The camera might get in the way. So there's a tool here I got from Dodkin many years ago. No, the camera is definitely going to be in the way. Sorry, you'll just have to move. Stand by. I've decided that I need to make up a special tool. I don't like the idea of trying to just catch the threads on this part here when it's fully loaded with the clutch spring pressure, just trying to get this to catch. I think there's a risk I might damage the threads. So I've come up with an idea to make a tool which will enable me to compress the springs, and then when they're compressed, then I'll be able to screw on that collar. Right, I'm just going to swap this over and machine the other side of it. I have the door of the workshop open now to let all the smoke from the cutting oil out. So if you hear any strange screeching and unpleasant sounds, it's not me, it's just the bloody foxes. Okay, off we go again. Tidy up this one, bore the hole to suit the collets, and I'll be ready to start securing the arms to this. Well, I didn't bother boring this hole because it's boring, but this is the tool. This in effect will be hacksawed into two parts. It will go in there and in effect become a split collet, which will push in on the springs, and then when I take this away, eventually I'll be able to just pull these two collet halves out of from behind the springs. So this was just rather a tiresome, boring bit of machining, but it's done now. All I have to do now is put a bar on the top, which in effect would be a strap. I can secure that to the bike, top and bottom, and generally tighten some studs in, which will pull this part down and squash the springs. And then I'll be able to put that threaded collar in under my own finger tension so that I'm comfortable with the way the threads have engaged. That's it. Right, this is the last couple of welds on this contraption. Right, that'll do nicely. Right, the plan is very simple. These are the shims that will go on top of the springs. These are the collets which will go on top of these shims, and then they will locate in here. So as that is then pushing the springs down, I can then drop this in and at my leisure apply the tool and just tighten that up, while these bronze collets in effect take all the load in squashing the spring. So all I have to do now is make some braces from here and here to the bike, and I'm gonna just do that with some basic hooks and some studding. Well, there you are, folks. Here's my special tool for spring compression being operated. I'll just tighten these up one at a time, slowly, surely. Springs are very tight or powerful, and by just driving this down nicely, I hope to be able to get that collar to engage with the threads on the sleeve gear. Right, this is the tool which is just on the completion of the spring compression, and from now on I'm going to just start undoing the tension on the studs, because the threaded collar is now home and lots of threads are engaged, and I feel very comfortable about that. There was one little thing which I didn't quite clarify from when I was using this tool. I ended up with these two collets in behind this collet, or this collar. So when I took the tool away, these remained, and I just had to flick these out, and then the springs took up the distance and bore on the collar here. So the collar is now being threaded in as far as it can go, and maneuvered only a few degrees to line up one of these holes with this locking grub screw and this little tongue, I suppose, which lodges or locates in the splines. So that's all now done. I've used a C-spanner to tweak this around to get the clutch approximately right, and what I plan to do tomorrow, it's a bit late now for all the noise, I shall start this up, I shall put it through in the gears, in gear, and I'll load the back brake a little bit and just work the clutch and make sure this chain has a reasonable tension in it at the end of it all. And then once the clutch has been scuffed a little bit, it will settle down, and then I'll go through the adjusting process, and then you'll be able to see the drama of the Velocette clutch adjustment. Exciting stuff. Right, I've just adjusted up the clutch, and I'm just going to pull the clutch lever in. Camera's a little bit wobbly at the moment, but you should see how little the lift is. And on the rear end of the clutch, it's actually a little bit less, but all of that averages out once things are rotating. And that, don't forget, there's that ball joint in the thrust bearing which sort of levels everything up, so it lifts off squarely once things are rotating. Right, I'm just going to fit the exhaust, but there's something that I've done over the years which I found very useful. I get a strip of aluminium foil, and I wrap this around the stub, because I found that the stub on the exhaust, it's quite possible for that to rust away and get slightly reduced in diameter, which tends then to lead to air leaks and all sorts of unpleasant pops and bangs. So I found by and this doesn't just work on metallic stubs that are sticking out of cylinder heads, it also works on cylinder heads where you can wrap the aluminium foil around the exhaust pipe and then push it into the hole in the cylinder head. So with all that done, what you do then is you just fold all that away, and the first time the engine fires, all of that stuff there will just get burned away, so it doesn't block anything up. And that roll of aluminium foil with a little veneer of silicone RTV on it. That works very well. I don't know if you saw all that. Right, I'm going to start this whole thing up. I've put some bits of masking tape on the outer part of this clutch so that you'll be able to see when it stops turning, because obviously there's driven and driving elements to the clutch. Obviously the engine keeps running, but when you're in gear and you're stationary, one part stays stationary. So it's just to illustrate the way the clutch functions, and then I'll go on and talk a little bit about the adjustment. As things stand at the moment, the thing appears to be adjusted nicely, but that's likely to change because I'm going to put it into gear and hit the back brake and just load the clutch gently to help settle it all in. Right, the last little bit of video which I shot was of me running the bike, going through the gears, up the gears, down the gears, hitting the brake, loading the clutch. And while I was giving you a commentary on all of that, essentially you couldn't hear anything because of the boom of the exhaust. So really, I'm also aware of the length of this video and the fact that I need to bring it to a conclusion. So a couple of key points just to give you an idea. This is the little tongue that goes in there and locates in the splines, which this screws onto in the sleeve gear, and that's the little grub screw down there which secures that. So that's just a view of that. The second thing is the clutch adjustment. If I just put that on there, hang on. This is a special Works. It's a 1/4 inch bolt with a flat on it. So what you do is you put this through the bolt, and then this flat locates on that. And then with the bike in neutral, or you can do it when you're in gear, if you then have the sprockets, you have the chain and sprocket, you put that in there and locate that in that little slot on the spring carrier, and then you just twitch the back wheel. The sprocket gets twisted that way or that way, and that's the key thing. So first of all, let me give you the 4 essential sequences to adjusting the clutch. First of all, you disconnect the clutch cable or put as much slack in it as you can. The second thing you do then is you use this method to twist this ring in and in until it gets to the point where the kickstarter won't turn the engine against compression. In effect, the clutch is slipping. You've got preload on those pins and the clutch release bearing. So then what you do is you twist this backwards. You go back, 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 and eventually you get to the point where you can stomp on the Kickstarter pedal against compression with full throttle, a good lungful of air, and still you can stand on it and the clutch doesn't slip. That's what you're looking for. That's completion of phase 2. In other words, 0 preload, 0 clearance, and a clutch which doesn't slip. Then the next thing you do is you go up to the handlebar and you adjust the cable. Little cable adjusters in here. I don't know if you can see that. Right, this is the clutch adjuster. You should be able to see that. What you do then is you adjust this cable adjuster till there is absolutely no slack in the clutch lever up at the handlebars. In other words, so to recap, you've got 0 slack in the cable and 0 slack in this mechanism down here. And that's the completion of phase 3. So when phase 4 comes along, which is the final phase, then you're back to this pin and you load that into the sprocket and you yank the back wheel and twist that around until this ring goes round. And then when you end up with about 1/8 of an inch of clearance on the clutch lever at the handlebar, that means that you've gone far enough. In other words, there's enough slack and clearance in this mechanism here, there's enough slack and clearance in the cable, and that gives you a maximum of potential lift to lift this away and make sure the clutch doesn't drag. Well, the time has come to bring this video to a conclusion. I've put all the casing all together and put some oil in it, done a little bit of security wiring, and that's now ready for road testing. The next video, which I'm going to do, I'm going to take the seat and tank off now and just check the tappets. I don't have to worry about the ignition timing or indeed the points, because I have one of these electronic magnetos which appears to have been working very well. The only difficulty I ever have with starting this old thing is when it wet sumps, and it's pretty obvious when the crank casing is full of cold 50 weight. So I drain the oil out, and I found that if I run the engine for a short while without heating the oil up in the tank, then there's a tendency for the little ball check valve just to weep oil overnight. So I found the way to deal with that is simply to, with a blow lamp, ever so gently, to warm the little housing at the bottom of the oil tank where the little ball valve is, and that somehow then empowers the spring to have enough strength to push through that thick oil and actually seal on the valve seat. So anyway, it's very exciting. I'm all ready to take it out on the road, but I just need to do another little bit of housework before I do that. So there will be another little video, and indeed some of you may be interested to see how I set the tappets on this whole thing. I don't like taking the cover over the cams. I don't like taking that off. I do all the adjustment and checking up at the cylinder head with a little finger gauge to check the movement. Anyway, you'll see all that in the next video. So look, thank you for bearing with me so far, and well, I'll see you again hopefully. All the best.